My life has been devoted to our family business. 10 years of missed vacations, strained relationships, and 80-hour work weeks. Then, one Friday, I unintentionally came upon court records that revealed my parents had covertly given my sister Paula, who hardly worked part-time, 75% of the business. A week after I quit working, my dad called me in a panic. Fearing that we might lose our biggest client, I told him to let Paula handle it. His expression was priceless. Please let me know where you're watching from before I embark on this crazy adventure. Hit the like and subscribe buttons after leaving your location in the comments section below. You'll want to stay to see what happened next if you've ever thought that your family doesn't value you. You might be inspired to advocate for yourself by my tale. My name is Rebecca Mitchell, and at the age of 32, I have already dedicated 10 years of my life to our family business. Mitchell Construction, playing beneath my father's enormous wood desk and coloring the backs of old invoices while he called clients is one of my first recollections. I was able to distinguish between a floor plan and a blueprint by the time I was 8 years old. When I was 12, I worked at the front desk during the summers, answering phones and organizing paperwork. Every time a client remarked on my polished phone manner, my father, Thomas Mitchell, smiled proudly. He would squeeze my shoulder and say, "She's got the Mitchell business sense." This location will eventually be controlled by Rebecca. My entire existence was molded by those words. I always wanted to transform Mitchell Construction into something amazing, even if other children wanted to be astronauts or veterinarians. My choice of college was obvious: construction administration as a minor combined with business management. The Monday after graduation, I immediately started working for my father after graduating first in my class and declining 3 offers of employment from prominent companies. I was surrounded by that company for the next 10 years. During busy times, I frequently slept on the office couch and was the last to depart. I developed relationships with all of my key clients, learning their anniversaries, children's names, and preferences by heart. I reduced our timetable overruns by 40% by using project management software, digitizing our records, and updating our accounting system. During my tenure as operations manager, revenue doubled. My personal life was almost non-existent. Even though my father continued to have the official position of CEO, I constantly put business crises ahead of date nights, which led to the breakup of 2 relationships. In essence, my apartment served as a place to take a shower and sometimes sleep. I stopped getting weekend vacation invitations from friends who knew I would say I was sorry. Our project has a due date. My college roommate's wedding fell during the Anderson construction contract negotiation, so I missed it. Our largest customer to date. Considering that I was constructing my future, I had no regrets about these sacrifices. Next was my sister Paula, who was 34 years old and 2 years older than me. She and I couldn't have been more dissimilar. She was imaginative while I was pragmatic, while I put in 80-hour work weeks. She traveled throughout Europe in her 20s, finished her degree in art history, and discovered who she was. She lived in cramped apartments in Florence and Barcelona, dated attractive men with accents, and returned home with tales of midnight swimming in the Mediterranean. Please understand that I cherished my sister. We simply lived in whole separate universes. The unfettered spirit was her. It was my responsibility. She was the daughter of our mother, lovely, sentimental, and artistic. I was the analytical, tenacious, and diligent son of our father. My parents embraced Paula when she abruptly returned home 2 years ago following a breakup with a French gallery owner. She had no prior construction expertise. But to my surprise, she showed interest in the family firm. For her, my father made a nebulous post of creative director. She took 2-hour lunches, worked perhaps 25 hours a week, and still departed by 4 o'clock, most of the time. At first, I didn't mind. My sister's suggestions for revamping our marketing materials looked fantastic, and I was glad to see her again. Linda, our mother, was overjoyed to see both of her daughters working for the company. Paula entertained us with tales of challenging clients, and family dinners resumed as a regular Sunday ritual. I mainly listened because I was too worn out from the work week to add much. In retrospect, I should have seen the warning indications that discussions about the company's future were beginning to wane. The way my mother would awkwardly alter the topic whenever I brought up long-term growth ideas, the private meetings between my father and Paula that I was not invited to, and the way I entered the room. "Rebecca, you put in too much work." "Refill my wine glass," she would remark. "Tonight, let's avoid discussing business." However, I had complete faith in my family from my early childhood. I had faith in the promise my father had given me, that I would eventually own Mitchell Construction, that the sacrifices made over the years would be worthwhile, that my commitment was important. I was going to find out how mistaken I was. It took place in late September on a Friday afternoon. I was trying to find the Riverside Development Project's original contract, following the discovery of a billing error. Our previously effective filing system was in disarray as a result of Paula's latest suggestion during a significant office reorganization. Assuming the contract might have been misfiled in the cabinet, I rummaged through it, marking legal documents as private. Instead, I discovered a thick manila envelope containing the ownership transfer for Mitchell Construction, nicely typed on the tab. As I took it out, I felt a knot in my gut. But I told myself that was probably simply old documents from when my grandfather had given my father the company decades ago. Just 6 months ago, on March 15th of this year, the date on the first page completely stopped me cold. I looked over the paper. I was positive I was misinterpreting things. There were few lines that stood out with frightening clarity within the complex legal terminology. This gives Paula Elizabeth Mitchell a 75% ownership stake, with Thomas and Linda Mitchell keeping the remaining 25%. The 20-page document had no mention of my name. My hands started to shake, and I could feel the blood draining from my face. Suddenly, the air seemed too thin and the office too bright. I turned page after page, searching for a sentence or explanation that would explain this betrayal. Nothing was present. "Are you all right?" "Rebecca, the office manager, Eleanor Johnson, has been with the company since before I was even born." Waited in the door. When she saw what I was holding, her expression changed from worry to remorse. "Were you aware of this?" With hardly more than a whisper, I asked. Eleanor's sensible shoes caught her attention. Her quiet at that precise moment validated what I had read in the document. The last to find out was me. "Your dad requested us not to talk about it." "When the time was appropriate," she added. "He wanted to inform you himself," I repeated when it was appropriate, a hint of hysteria beginning to sneak into my voice. "Eleanor, 6 months have passed." I pushed the papers back into the folder and held it to my breast as she reached for me, but I flinched away. "Does anyone else know the majority of senior staff members were notified?" "For the purpose of signing a contract," she acknowledged. The treachery was not as painful as the humiliation. Everyone was aware that they had all seen me work myself to the bone. I now know my sister on the business I have dedicated my life to, Rebecca. How they must have felt sorry for me. Eleanor resumed, but I had already passed her with the folder clutched firmly in my hands. I had to leave. I muttered as I went to my office to retrieve my handbag. I ignored the partially completed reports on my desk and my laptop. It seemed as though nothing mattered anymore. The trip home went by quickly. I hardly noticed that I was almost sideswiping a delivery truck or running a red light. Every discussion my father had had concerning my future at the company was replayed in my head. He had promised that one day, "Becca, you would have all of this," pointing to the small office that had since grown into a 2-story structure on my first day of official work. At the workplace Christmas dinner last year, he said, "I'm training you to take over so I can retire by 65. Falsehoods. Everything. When I got to my flat, everything was silent and dark. In the 5 years that I had lived there, I had not bothered to decorate much. I didn't spend much time at home, so what was the point? Still holding onto the folder, I collapsed into my couch and gazed at the empty wall where family pictures might have been displayed. What had I done incorrectly? Had I not put in enough effort? Was I not intelligent enough? Not imaginative enough, like vultures? The questions circled. Every project I'd successfully finished, every customer relationship I'd fostered, and every late night and early morning I'd dedicated to Mitchell construction came to mind as the room grew darker around me. For what purpose so that everything I had contributed to may be taken by my sister when she returned after a 10-year absence? My lungs were crushed by the injustice of it. I lost 10 years of my life. Those sacrifices were all in vain. Paula had been presented with the future I had been promised, while I was not watching. I grabbed my phone and called Allison, the only person that sprang to mind. "It's me. I must speak." The second ring was answered by my best friend from college. "Are you crying?" "Rebecca." "What's the matter?" Only as she stated it did I realize that tears were flowing down my face. Paula was given the company, I said, the words sounding strange to me. 75% ownership, behind my back, months in the past. God. Oh God. Allison took a breath. That isn't possible. I'll be over. Stay put. I was too exhausted to argue. Until Allison's key turned in my lock, I sat in the dark reading the paper that demonstrated my family's treachery over and over again. She put her arms around me 30 minutes later, and one glance at her face filled with indignation on my behalf broke the numbness that had descended. Finally, I broke down in tears. "Ali," I gasped out, 10 years. 10 years of my existence. She stroked my hair and murmured, "I know, honey." I am aware that we remained like way until I was left with nothing but a hollow feeling in my chest and a decision that was beginning to take shape. I wouldn't give it any more if they didn't appreciate what I had to offer. Paula could definitely manage the business if she owned it. It was time to quit doing free labor. When Sunday night finally arrived, I felt a sixth sense of dread rising within of me. I had chosen to confront my family at our usual supper after spending Saturday with Allison planning my next course of action. When I got to my parents' suburban house at exactly 6 o'clock in the evening, the well-kept lawns and brick facade seemed like the front of a stranger's house. I entered the kitchen without knocking, and the aroma of my favorite dish, my mother's pot roast, filled the air. My father was reviewing what appeared to be project documentation while seated in his normal armchair with reading glasses balanced on his nose. In the kitchen, Paula was preparing the supper table while giggling over a comment made by our mother. It seemed so typical, so ordinary, as though they hadn't totally turned my life upside down. My mother called happily, "Rebecca." The time was ideal. "We're almost done with dinner." I mechanically took her hug and feigned a grin. "Can I be of any assistance?" No. Paula is in control of everything. Simply unwind. Paula smiled at me. "Hello, sister. How is your Saturday going?" "You didn't reply when I tried texting you about the new client presentation because I was too preoccupied with an existential crisis about the corporate store?" I thought sourly. "I simply needed some disconnected time," I said incoherently. "It's a good presentation." At last, my dad raised his head from his papers. "You're there. I was beginning to suspect that you had not eaten dinner. In regards to the Westridge project, we have some wonderful news." His conversational tone, as though nothing had changed. Something inside of me snapped. However, I remained silent. "Not quite yet. I had to finish dinner first to make sure they weren't going to be honest with me." Dinner hurt. As usual, my family talked business while I pushed food about my plate. Paula spoke passionately about her concepts for a fresh advertising campaign. My dad gave her every word a nod of approval. My mother persisted in attempting to change the subject to something safer. "The new puppy from the neighbor is her garden club. A community benefit is coming soon." I answered straightforward questions with the fewest possible words, hardly speaking. My remarkable silence was not mentioned by anyone who could have observed it. I couldn't force myself to taste the apple pie that was served after dinner. My dad got up. I suppose I'll go see the game through to the end. Later, Paula came to my study. I would like to talk about that supplier issue. In fact, it was now or never. My voice was fairly steady as I spoke. I need to speak with everyone at once. They froze at something in my tone, halfway through. My mother's hand stopped to clear a plate. Paula paused her smile. My dad sat down again gently. Rebecca, what's going on? My mom inquired. Her voice was beginning to sound worried. I took out the folder from within my purse. I found out on Friday, putting it at the dining table center on purpose. When did you intend to inform me of this? The ensuing hush was deafening. My father's visage hardened into the one he wore when he had to deal with challenging customers. My mother's eyes widened in shock as her hand shot to her throat. Paula immediately became quite interested in her napkin and looked down in her lap. Where did you purchase that? At last, my dad inquired. Is it important? Was I meant to work 80-hour weeks for the rest of my life without knowing that my sister controls the business? Or were you ever going to inform me? Mom stretched out and grabbed my hand. We were going to tell you. Darling. We simply couldn't decide on a suitable time. I withdrew my hand. You should have waited until after you signed these documents. Mom, Rebecca, not 6 months later. In a firm, businesslike tone, my father said, this was a calculated move for Mitchell Construction's future. Paula has new ideas and a different vision for the company's future. I also don't. My voice rose with every question after 10 years of devoted devotion, after we doubled our sales, after I gave up everything for this company. You resemble me too much, my father said. As though that clarified everything for the traditional, we must adapt to the changing needs of the building business. So instruct me. I slammed my hand down on the table so forcefully that the silverware jumped as I yelled. Why didn't you just speak with me if you wanted alternative ideas? We assumed you would comprehend, my mother said feebly. You've always been so realistic, so sensible when it comes to business choices, and realistic enough to put in endless hours for a firm that promised me things. Was that the sensible business choice you thought I would comprehend? At last? Paula raised her voice. It wasn't like that. Becca, Dad came up to me with the concept. How about I interrupt her? Don't act as though you were unaware of what you were stealing from me. It's not fair. My dad stepped in. Paula's expansion goals for the residential sector and our recent success have been greatly aided by her. I gave a sour laugh. Are you referring to the same ideas that I showed you 3 years ago? The people you contacted. Too dangerous. My suspicion was verified by his brief quiet. I went on, my voice shaking with wrath. Let me get this straight. I kept working myself to the bone, believing I was creating my future. While you rejected my ideas and gave them to Paula along with 75% of the business, my father sneered. You're being dramatic, Rebecca. You're still employed? Excellent work with room for improvement. Possibility of growth. I said it again incredulously. For years, I have been in charge of that business, while you and your clients were playing golf. What precisely am I meant to be developing toward at this point? My mother begged you to share your experience with your sister. You two have always worked well together. Mom, we're not a team. She is the owner and I am the workhorse. There is a distinction. I looked across at Paula. Paula, how many hours did you put in this week, 2025? As I finished the Anderson bed, I pulled 3 all-nighters. Paula had the grace to appear embarrassed. Becca, I know you put in more effort than I do. I've always respected your commitment. I really admired it. The company was taken by you. I should have had that. My father sprang up and thundered, That's enough! This was not a hasty commercial choice. Paula is a good person. This business must advance. And just what are those the capacity to enchant customers while taking 3-hour lunch breaks? In the meantime, Mitchell Construction is the focus of my entire adult life. I've given up any sort of personal life and missed weddings and relationships because I trusted in the future you promised me. My eyes burned with tears, but I'm not letting them go. They wouldn't get the satisfaction from me. Now what? My dad insisted, "Your point has been made. What are you looking for?" I gently got up and gathered the paperwork in my handbag. Nothing. No more. Paula can manage the business if she owns it. I give up. You can't give up. My dad sputtered out. Next week, the Anderson project will begin. Friday is the deadline for the Maxwell bid, the financials for the quarter. Give it to Paula, I said icily. I've finished my free labor. My mom broke down in tears. Please, Rebecca, we are related. Mom, family doesn't treat one another like this. I took a step toward the door and turned to face the 3 astonished faces. Tomorrow, I will formally resign by email. Do not be concerned. I'll act professionally, as opposed to some of the people in this room. I heard the front door behind me open as I made my way to my car. Despite Paula calling my name, I didn't look back. My hands were shaking so much that I could hardly put the key in the ignition as I climbed into my car. I waited until I was 3 blocks away before I pulled over and started crying. As it has for the last 10 years, my alarm went off at 5:30 a.m. on Monday. For a moment, blissful and fleeting. Before the weekend's events slammed back, I instinctively reached for my phone. Neither today nor in the future did I have to report to work. Not to Mitchell Construction, anyhow. After turning off the alarm, I reclined and gazed at the ceiling. The traditional Monday morning jitters, without the business. There was an unsettling void in place of mental checklists, expected client calls, and project deadlines. Who was I 10 years of taking the same morning routine shower at 5:45, coffee at 6:15, an email check at 6:15, and then leaving? I had reached 6:30 and was at a loss. Out of habit, I brewed coffee, but I didn't touch it on the counter. I glanced at the tidy rows of professional clothes in my wardrobe before shutting it again without making any selections. After a while, I put on an old college hoodie and yoga pants, which I normally saved for the few hours of weekend freedom I gave myself. I had already checked my phone 15 times by 7 in the morning. My parents haven't called me yet. Paula didn't text in desperation. A part of me felt let down. Did they truly believe they could run the company without me? I was also relieved to have room to think about what I should do next. I called my undergraduate mentor, William Barnes, who now owned a prosperous engineering firm, at 8:30. For years, he had been attempting to recruit me. "Rebecca," he said kindly, "this is not what was intended. Don't tell me that Thomas finally got the better of you." I gave a funny laugh. "You don't know?" I told the entire story over the course of the following hour. William listened undisturbed, occasionally expressing his shock or indignation on my behalf. When I was done, he responded, "That's unconscionable. After all of your contributions to that business." Incredibly so. William, was it foolish of me to have trusted him for so long? "No," he answered firmly. "You're devoted. That is not the same as being stupid. However, loyalty must be returned. What should I do now?" You start by protecting yourself. Keep a record of everything. Your client relationship and your contributions, any proprietary procedures or systems you created, not to accept them. In a brief explanation, he made it apparent that you are valuable for whatever happens next. I took his suggestion and did so for the remainder of the morning. I made a thorough report that included every significant project I had overseen, every customer relationship I had developed, and every system I had put in place. I took care to omit any company secrets or private material that might subsequently cause legal problems in favor of just facts and data. However, I was strategic in what I left out. My own observations regarding client preferences, I spent years developing my relationship management strategies. I had developed shortcuts and efficiencies that were not formally recorded anywhere, not the corporations, but these were a component of my value. I wrote a formal email resignation at midday. It was impersonal, professional, and showed no signs of the emotional turmoil that was going on. I declared that, in accordance with my job contract, I would be taking my accrued 6 weeks of vacation time, effective immediately. It had been 10 years since I had taken more than a long weekend. Unused vacation time had accumulated. I configured an autoresponder for emails. I'm not in the office right now, so I can't answer any questions. Please use the email address to get in touch with Paula Mitchell. After that, I put my work phone in a drawer and turned it off. The remainder of the day was a haze of administrative work, including updating my resume, collecting my personal financial records, and verifying that I wasn't breaking any terms of my employment contract with the assistance of my lawyer buddy, Sofia Rodriguez. The first time in 10 years, you are aware of how marketable you are. Sofia recapped my experience. Any construction company would be fortunate to have you on board. My wounded pride was soothed by her words. I hadn't given myself permission to think about how useful I may be outside of Mitchell Construction. I drove to the office that evening after dark to pick up my personal items. I had selected 9 p.m., which was purposefully late enough that nobody would be around, but not so late that the security cameras would pick it up as strange. I was fully entitled to get my belongings, and I still had my key and security code. It was oddly silent in the workplace. I packed reference books, pictures, prizes, and the few ornaments I had gathered over the years, moving as efficiently as possible. I left behind everything, no matter how minor, that the firm had paid for. I wouldn't allow them to accuse me of improper behavior. I discovered the framed family portrait from the company's 25th anniversary celebration 5 years ago as I was clearing out my desk. With a proud grin, my father had wrapped his arms around Paula and me. We all appeared so content and unified. Was everything a dream? My determination faltered for a second. Nevertheless, this was still my family. Did I overreact, discarding not only my work but also my bond with my sister and parents? The ownership transfer document then came back to me. The years of struggle that had been in vain. The nonchalant way they talked about business ideas without me. I put the picture face down in my box, turned off my office light for the last time, and left my keys and a short message on Eleanor's desk. Send my last paycheck, please. I experienced an odd mix of liberation and grief as I drove home. My life had closed a chapter, but maybe a new one had begun. One where I truly appreciated myself was about to start. It was confusing on the first day of freedom. I slept until 9 in the morning, spent the morning in a peculiar state of limbo, continuously checking my personal phone for messages that weren't there, after experiencing anything for the first time in years. By the afternoon, my family's stillness was starting to stand out. They must have concluded by now that I would not be returning. I brought the company ownership documentation and my employment contract when I met Sofia for lunch. They haven't done anything illegal legally, after evaluating everything ethically, she confirmed. That's a different matter. What choices do I have? I inquired. I pushed my hardly touched salad aside. Based on your years of employment, you might be able to negotiate a severance compensation. A tiny ownership stake could be negotiated as a thank you for your contributions. Or she stopped and looked at me calmly. You may just up and leave and start something else. In the absence of Mitchell Construction, I am unsure of my identity. I acknowledge it. Perhaps now is the moment to find out. Gently. She made a suggestion. Over the next few days, I developed a routine that was unrelated to my job. Morning strolls in the park I had never been to but had driven past for years. Breakfasts that are actually sat down rather than coffee, gulped as she checked her yoga lessons and emails. I'd never been able to go since I was too busy. I tried to silence the voice in my head that kept asking what emergencies were occurring at work, read books for leisure, and got some rest. On the third day, the technician began, Paula, Where are the changes to the Anderson contract? Paula, you are especially requested by the Westridge client. How do I inform them Paula Dad is frantic over the Maxwell bed? Have you completed the cost estimates? None of them got a response from me. On the fourth day, my father began to call. They were sent to voicemail. This is absurd. Rebecca, your point has been made. We have obligations to our customers. Give me a call back right now. My mom was more subdued. She sounded guilty in her voice messages. We're all quite concerned about you. Sweetie, it's not like you're giving up on your work in this way. There are challenges in family companies, but we can overcome them together. By the end of the first week, I had removed them all. In order to deal with the anger and betrayal, I established a self-care regimen. Journaling in the morning to express my emotions. After consulting with executive recruiters in the afternoon, they were astounded by my credentials. Calls in the evening with pals I had not seen for years due to 80-hour work weeks. However, my mental state remained precarious. I wavered between being empowered and not. I'm finally defending myself and getting over my sadness about the years I've spent. I would occasionally be standing in my kitchen, wondering how long I had been looking at the wall. Reliving the times on day 6 when I ought to have recognized the warning signs. Rebecca, my personal cell phone, was phoned by Maxwell Anderson himself. Through the speaker came his scratchy voice. What's happening there? Although your sister and I have been working together, she doesn't know nearly as much as you do about the requirements of our project. Our largest client, Anderson Construction, had Maxwell as its CEO. His business accounted for around 30% of Mitchell Construction's yearly income. I apologize, I replied cautiously. Mr. Anderson, I am now on extended leave. If you need anything, Paula should be able to help. I didn't ask that question, he pushed. For 5 years, you have served as my point of contact. All of a sudden, you're on leave. And nobody at Mitchell will directly respond to me. Next month, a $12 million project will begin, and I need someone capable to oversee it. I feel the usual tug of duty when I close my eyes. It would be quite simple to intervene and make things right. I am no longer able to oversee your project. Mr. Anderson, if you don't trust Mitchell Construction's current leadership, maybe you should think about what you can do. A long pause ensued. I see, he responded at last. Well, if things change for you. My number is with you, and if you wind up somewhere else, Rebecca, please give me a call. In my opinion, loyalty to competent project managers is more important than loyalty to businesses. I hung up and sat thinking about what he had said for a while. For the first time, I gave myself permission to honestly think about a future that was entirely unrelated to Mitchell Construction. My father contacted me again exactly 1 week after I had left. Something prompted me to respond this time. Rebecca. Without a preamble. He barked. His voice was filled with panic. Anderson has threatened to terminate their agreement. $12 million. He declares he will not collaborate with Paula. You must come in tomorrow to resolve this. A peculiar serenity descended upon me. I would have rushed to the office 7 days ago to work through the night to salvage the relationship because of this situation. I felt strangely aloof now. Give it to Paula. Equally, I said. After all, she owns the business. Oh no. Rebecca, it's not a game. Your granddad founded this company. Your roots. My heritage is you. I cut you off. A flare of anger. Remember how you gave Paula my heritage? This is not something I have time for. He yelled. Anderson is taking his business to Westfield unless he receives a response by tomorrow morning. After that, I advised Paula to begin crafting a superb presentation. I hung up and put my phone on silent, anticipating his arrival at my door. 20 minutes later, my doorbell did indeed ring through the crowds. My father was standing there, looking more unkempt than I had ever seen him before. The confident posture he took pleasure in had been replaced with bowed shoulders, and his normally impeccable tie was a mess. I briefly thought about not responding, but I'd never been the type to flee. I inhaled deeply before opening the door to confront whatever was ahead. My father didn't wait for an invitation before pushing past me into the living room. Like a caged animal, he paced back and forth across my tiny living room, his every step exuding anxiety. "Are you aware of what you have done?" He ran a hand through his gray hair and demanded. "Anderson is only the first step. This morning, Westridge called and expressly asked for you. Paula finds it difficult to understand your early notes, and the Maxwell bed is due on Friday." I pressed myself up against the wall, crossed arms. It seems like a management issue. Fortunately, Paul is the proprietor. He flushed. "Rebecca, this isn't funny. The business is having a crisis." Calmly, I responded. "No, Dad. For the first time, you are experiencing a crisis. You're dealing with the fallout from your choice to hand over the business to someone who is incapable of managing it." He scowled at me and stopped pacing. "Isn't this something you're enjoying? Processing is not enjoyable as you see things fall apart." "There is a distinction." I motioned for him to occupy the armchair across from me as I shifted to sit on the couch. He hesitated for a second, then he sat down heavily. His tone changed to one I was familiar with after countless conversations with challenging clients. "I didn't come here to fight. I'm here to give you an answer. I'm paying attention," he said. "Chief Operations Officer. Complete control over project administration. Pay. Double your previous earnings. The corner office." I almost burst out laughing. "You're offering me more money and a different title in exchange for me returning to my previous position." "This is a big promotion," he said. "Report directly to Paula, the CEO." I spoke up. I would inform Paula. It was reinforced by his silence. "Allow me to comprehend," I added. "You want me to return to the company and clean up the mess you made while you were still employed by the sister to whom you granted my birthright. You're offering that." "Rebecca, what do you want?" he inquired. His voice was filled with frustration. 40% of the business, without hesitation. I said, "Position on the board, regular business hours." His gaze expanded. "That is absurd." 75% is already owned by Paula. She can then resell some, or you and your mother might split your 25 with me. How it works mathematically doesn't matter to me. I use those terms. Not possible, he sneered. It's unrealistic to think that Westfield would have offered me a job yesterday. Operations director, I cut in politely. Compensation that is comparable to what you just offered, with profit sharing and weeks of regular work hours. Every year, I have to take a vacation. This was not totally accurate. Garrett Westfield and I had spoken briefly, but there had been no official offer as of yet. Nevertheless, my father's shocked expression made the slightest lie worthwhile. "You wouldn't," he muttered. I responded. "There are the biggest competitors I haven't accepted yet. Maxwell Anderson, however, has already promised to accompany me everywhere." How many additional clients would follow suit? I wonder Mitchell Construction would be destroyed. For the first time, my father spoke with real terror in his eyes. "I won't keep building something that isn't mine, but I don't want to ruin anything. Dad." He got up and started pacing again. "There must be an alternative. The one I just suggested is there. 40% of the board is owned. Regular hours. Paula would never consent to ceding that level of authority. Perhaps you need to have considered it before initially granting her authority. Equally," I said, "you no longer have the upper hand in this negotiation. I now recognize my value." "Do you?" He looked at me for a while. Behind his gaze, I could practically see the computations taking place, balancing the expense of fulfilling my demands against the possible loss of important clients, my institutional expertise, and my connections in the sector. "Paula and Mother, I have to speak with you. At last." He spoke. "That's what you do." He turned around after making his way to the door. "Before you accept Westfield's offer, how long do I have?" 2 days, choosing a deadline, I said. That made sense. Your response must be received by Wednesday night. When he was gone, I reclined on the sofa. My heart is racing. That was a new approach for me to talk to my father, on an equal basis, not as his employee or daughter. It was simultaneously thrilling and horrifying. My mother called an hour later. I let the voicemail go. Then Paula. The same answer. I refused to allow them to use emotional appeals or tag team me. The days of corporate decisions being influenced by family sentiment were past. I had a formal meeting with Garrett Westfield the following morning. He was 10 years younger than my father and had a reputation for being innovative, which had contributed to the recent explosive growth of his business. He stated over coffee. I've been trying to poach you for years. Thomas always made it obvious that you were not welcome. Things change, I said. I hear that. A folder he slipped across the table. What we can provide is this. Give it some thought for a few days. The offer was more substantial than I had suggested to my father. To avoid the turmoil of the Mitchell family, it was tempting to accept right away. But I was slowed down by something. I still had a connection to Mitchell Construction despite everything. My mom came over with a casserole that night to see how you were doing. I allowed her in despite being aware of the obvious attempt to win me over. As she busied herself serving the food I had requested, she said, Your father is devastated. I clarified that he is upset about perhaps losing business and money. Sitting across from me at my tiny dining table, she sighed and said she didn't mean to harm me. That's not all there is to it. Rebecca, you are loved by him. Both of us do, Mom. Respect should be a part of love. You weren't respectful in what you did. She surprised me by admitting, I know. I told him that excluding you out of the decision was wrong, but when he believes he's right, you know how he gets. What about Paula? Did she believe that taking all I had fought so hard for was appropriate? My mom's eyes lowered to her hands. Paula felt under strain. She was persuaded by your father that it was the finest course of action for everyone. Although that was intriguing information, my stance remained unchanged. I still stand by my terms. 40% of the business, position on the board, regular hours. He's thinking about it, she murmured softly. Harold and he are currently meeting to go over his alternatives. For many years, Harold Peterson served as our family's attorney. My father was paying attention to my desires if he was consulting him. My mother's departure left me feeling oddly uneasy. The chance that I might receive what I desired after all. It was nearly more difficult to accept that my father might see my worth than the betrayal. The next day went by without any family members getting in touch. I take the time to thoroughly go over Westfield's offer and get ready to ask Mitchell whether he would agree to my terms. At exactly 6 p.m., I had to be prepared to proceed. Wednesday. My phone rang. The name of my father came up on the screen. When I replied, his voice said, Rebecca. Official. To talk about your suggestion, we would want to get together tomorrow. Neutral site. At midday, the restaurant along the river. You all I inquired. Indeed, Harold, Paula, and your mother will take care of the paperwork. If we agree, I'll be present, I said as I hung up, before he finished speaking. As with any significant discussion, I prepared that evening by going over the numbers, foreseeing objections, and rehearsing my answers. It was more than just a question of ownership percentages. In one way or another, tomorrow's meeting will drastically alter my connection with Mitchell Construction and my family. It was about regaining my worth on both a professional and personal level. I gained unexpected clarity when my family and I were silent for 2 days, without the continual stream of cries for help and messages that make you feel guilty. In fact, I was able to reflect on my own desires. Normally used only as a place to sleep in between workdays, my apartment turned into a haven for introspection. I put on a power suit that I had worn to clinch our biggest deals as part of my meticulous preparation for the meeting on Thursday morning. Hair pulled back in a tidy ponytail, little makeup. Before going to the restaurant by the river, I needed every advantage I could get from this confrontation, because my beauty had always been a component of my professional armor. Garrett Westfield conducted my last phone interview. Even better than the original proposition was the formal offer: Director of Operations with a 5-year plan for partnership. I had always yearned for my father to receive this kind of attention. "The prospect of you joining us excites us," Rebecca Garrett stated. "You have an excellent reputation in the field." I said, "Thank you," feeling, for the first time in my career, truly appreciated. By tomorrow, I should have a response for you. Walking into the restaurant with the Westfield offer as a backup gave me the confidence I needed. My family was already sitting at a corner table when I arrived, which was exactly at noon. They were seated with Harold Peterson. In front of him, the leather portfolio opened. I offered a hand, but my mother got up to give me a hug. This was not a reunion of the family. The meeting was for business. Her eyes were filled with pain as she sat back down. Paula and my father gave me a cold hello nod. "I appreciate you coming." Formally, my father started, "After reviewing your suggestion," I maintained a neutral expression. Even yet, my heart was racing. Paula spoke up before we could get to it. "I have something to say." She gave me a direct glance. She fidgets with her napkin with artful hands. "I apologize. Rebecca, I had no intention of hurting you or stealing your hard-earned money. I wasn't anticipating an apology, not from Paula first, in particular. It threw me off balance for a moment. The fact is," she added, "I'm overburdened. I've been working 18-hour days in an attempt to stay up with everything you did with ease. I'm totally lost on the Anderson account alone. They could as well write their demands in hieroglyphics. You've spent 2 years there. I made a point. Did you not observe how the creative side of things worked to the working nuts and bolts?" "Yes." She gave a headshake. "I believed that without you, I could learn as I went." Her voice faltered. My dad cleared his throat. "Your sister is attempting to convey that we were wrong. Between us, the admission lingered. I haven't heard my dad own up to a mistake so openly in 32 years. If I wanted the company," Dad asked. Paula spoke softly. "He didn't inform me that you had been promised something your entire life. Not until after the signing of the documents. My father, who had the decency to appear ashamed, caught my eye." "Is that accurate?" I questioned him. "I might have minimized some expectations," he said. "I assumed that everyone would find it simpler." My mother stretched for me across the table, but she didn't touch my hand. "Rebecca, we haven't slept much since you left, not only because of the business issues, but also because we caused you such much pain. We never meant to do that." Harold cleared his throat. "Maybe we ought to talk about the proposal's terms. In light of our discussions from yesterday, I have formulated a number of choices. We bargained for the next hour. I vehemently disagreed with my father's initial 20% ownership counteroffer. To my amazement, Paula offered to give me a direct transfer of 35% of her portion. Anyway, she added, I never wanted to be the majority owner. All I wanted was to work for the family firm without having to spend all of my time in the accounting division, I said. You could have told me that a decade ago. However, my statements lacked the bite they would have had a week ago. We had formulated an agreement by the time our meals arrived. Paula would transfer 35% of the business to me, making her stake 40%. My parents would keep their 25%. Paula, who would concentrate on customer interactions and creative direction, would have equal decision-making authority with me as Chief Operations Officer. No significant modifications could be made without the consent of at least 2 of the 3 ownership parties, as her actions would need to be approved by the majority. The agreement, which I found most significant, required all executives to work a maximum of 45 hours a week and to take at least 3 weeks of vacation time each year. Harold authored the last points. stating that his generation would be the last to embrace the mentality of never-ending effort that had characterized Mitchell Construction under my father. Paula leaned in my direction. "Can we have a conversation? Only the two of us." My first reaction was to say no, but for 5 minutes, something in her face prevented me from doing so. We left our parents and the lawyer behind and went out onto the riverfront terrace of the restaurant. "I never intended to cause you harm," she said right away. "Dad made it seem like you were too valuable in operations to take over as owner, and that the company needed you right where you were when he approached me about taking over, and you thought I was unable to control my cynicism." She acknowledged that after years of feeling like the family let down, it was gratifying to be wanted. "So I wanted to. While you were the successful one, the artistic daughter was unable to hold a regular job. I gaped at her in shock. I was the favorite. You thought Dad was often talking about your new outlook." She said only after I returned. It was always, "Why can't you be more like Rebecca before that?" Rebecca is aware of her desires. Rebecca is constructing something. Each of us adjusted decades of family dynamics from this fresh angle as we stood in quiet. "We haven't actually spoken. Have we? Not about anything serious?" I said at last. "No," Paula concurred. "We were too busy vying for one another's attention." She paused. "Rebecca, I don't want to be the CEO. I'm not very good at it. However, I do wish to help the business. If I had your operational experience, I could effectively implement some really good ideas I have. For the first time, I could see a time in the future when Paula and I would truly play to one another's strengths rather than against them." It was a start, but it wasn't forgiveness yet. Harold had the draft agreement prepared for our perusal when we got back to the table. The structure remained as we discussed, but we spent an additional hour fine-tuning the specifics. By the middle of the day, we had a document that preserved the family business and safeguarded my interests. "It will take us a few days to do everything correctly," Harold said. "However, once this letter of intent is signed, we can start the procedure one by one. My mother, Paula, and father were the first to be signed, followed by me." I felt a weight come off my shoulders as I put the pen down. Lighter, but not gone entirely. "Tomorrow, will you return to the office as we were about to depart?" my father questioned. "Anderson continues to threaten to terminate his contract." I gave a head shake. "Not tomorrow. I need time to think things through and turn down another job offer that I've been thinking about a lot." The reminder that I had alternatives to Mitchell Construction caused his eyes to widen a little. In addition, I mentioned that I still had 5 weeks left on my formal vacation. "Actually, I guess I'll take a little of it. Starting Monday, I will be reachable via phone for actual emergencies." My mother gave me a quick hug before we left the restaurant. I didn't pull away this time. "We need to rebuild a lot," she said. "Relationships, not just business." I did agree. "Yes, we do." I felt oddly dizzy as I walked to my car. Despite the destruction of the future I had dreamed about for years, something fresh and possibly better was emerging from the ruins. Rebuilding trust would take time, and it wasn't flawless. However, it was a beginning. I called Garrett Westfield that night to tell him that my family's circumstances had changed and to decline his offer. He said, "I can't say I'm not disappointed. However, I recognize the allure of family business. If things don't work out, we're still willing to make the offer. You have no idea how much I appreciate that. Still keeping that safety blanket in place." I answered honestly. I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened a bottle of wine. Nothing at all. No project planning. No work correspondence. No crisis control. Simply enjoying the sunset while sitting on my balcony and letting my mind wander to a time when work was significant but not all-consuming. I felt like I could breathe for the first time in 10 years. After a month, I entered Mitchell Construction as the Chief Operations Officer and co-owner. The dynamics of change were mirrored by my new office, which is now my father's corner office as originally given. It was a remodeled space with lots of windows and space for both a conventional workstation and a cozy meeting place. The weeks in between had been life-changing, for the first time in 10 years. I had taken a true holiday, traveling alone to a beach resort where I spent 10 wonderful days reading books, swimming, and sleeping. After I got back, I worked with a career counselor who helped me set up sensible boundaries between my personal and professional lives. The business had also altered. We had put in place a new organizational structure that capitalized on everyone's strengths with Paula's consent. She assumed control of the marketing and client acquisition departments. Where her aptitude for people and creative thinking were evident, I oversaw project execution, operations, and finances. My innate areas of expertise. As part of a 3-year retirement plan, my father grudgingly took on an advising role, concentrating on training younger employees and progressively cutting back on his hours. During our morning meeting, I informed Paula that the Anderson contract was secure. Maxwell expressed satisfaction that his project will get the attention it requires when I showed him the new management structure yesterday. "That's great!" Paula responded with a tone of sincere relief. "He kept asking for you even though I made a lot of effort to connect with him. Competency is more important to his old-school building than appeal." I softened the comments with a grin, but that was all about the Westridge extension. "You're there, ecstatic about the design ideas, without the underlying rivalry that had defined our relationship for decades. We had found an unanticipated rhythm in which we both acknowledged the contributions of the other." Surprisingly, the workers had adapted to the new leadership style. Many appeared to be happy that the stress of the previous month had subsided and that the 80-hour workweek requirement had been formally lifted. We had put in place new project management tools that increased productivity without necessitating excessive overtime. Later that day, Eleanor, who had been there for the whole scene, dropped by my office. She noticed that the place feels different. "Better," I said, less panicked. "More balanced," she said. "Although your father created something amazing, it was only ever one-dimensional. With Paula and you collaborating, her comments, which earlier would have taken up all of my mental energy during meetings and client calls, gave me a sense of completion that was lacking before." For the first time, I was looking forward to leaving at a respectable hour in the evening. I firmly shut down my laptop at 6 p.m. I was going to eat dinner with Nathan Rivera, an engineer I had met years ago on the Anderson project, but had never had time to get to know. During the conversations with Anderson, we had reconnected, and his sharp humor and quiet skill had been a nice diversion from the stress in the family. Paula showed up in my doorway as I was gathering my belongings. She joked that she was already leaving. Until midnight, the Rebecca I knew would be present. That's something Rebecca was making up for. I answered, "There are dinner reservations and an ownership stake in this one." She shared Nathan's enigmatic laughter. "You won't discuss the second date with me. It's too early to question family members." "All right," she paused. "Mom contacted you before you left. She is adamant that Sunday family dinners be resumed. Claims that we need time to heal or whatever. The idea of going back to those dinners with their complex past also made me hesitate. Mom, I'm not sure. Paula, we talk about it." I told her. There is no pressure. She rearranged the vibrant scarf around her neck, a holdover from her creative life that now went well with her more formal clothes. "In any case, I believe we may benefit from practicing being a typical family, whatever that entails. I would have flatly rejected the concept a month ago. Now I was thinking about it. Perhaps. Give it some thought. I only ask that." She took a step back. "Have fun on your date. For at least 12 hours. Avoid thinking about your work." As I drove to the restaurant, she smiled and corrected me, saying, "Doctor's orders, owner's orders." How much had changed in such a short period of time astounded me. The company was doing quite well. Under the new framework, our first quarter estimates immediately indicated improvement. Paula had discovered her specialty in marketing and customer service, and her creative methods had brought in 3 new clients. I have cut expenses without compromising quality by implementing operational savings. Even my father appeared to be taking a step back in relief. But sometimes he couldn't help giving uninvited advice. Above all, I had taken back my life. I spent 3 days a week at the gym. A book club is what I joined. I was thinking of getting a puppy, something I never would have thought about when I was working 80-hour weeks. Nathan and I had a pleasant and interesting date. I was able to relate the recent drama without the deep sorrow that had accompanied it only weeks before when he inquired about my family. He summarized, "So you stood your ground and got what you deserved." It's impressive. Winning wasn't the only goal. I thought about it. It was about having the right amount of worth in both their eyes and mine. They're fortunate to have retained you, in my opinion, as someone who has worked with both Mitchell and Westfield. Lifting his glass, he made a little toast. The Sunday after that. I debated for a while before deciding to go to the family dinner. There was no longer any fear in the customary trip to my parents' house. Paula examined my mother after opening the door. I was aware that they had planned this, purposefully introducing me to family dynamics through the relationship that had initially started to mend. Our dinners were not like the ones we used to have. My dad was more subdued and silent. With eager eyes, my mother observed us all, interrupting when business talk threatened to dominate the conversation. Paula and I kept up the new rapport we had formed, which was maybe healthier than the one we had as kids. My father came up to me in the kitchen as we were helping to wash the dishes. He continued clumsily, "I've been meaning to tell you. Last week, you and Paula made an outstanding board presentation. It was better than I could have done. This was monumental to him, an acknowledgement that we might be a better leader for the organization than he is. I admitted that we are a good squad, different viewpoints, different strengths. Indeed." He cleared his throat. Then, "I ought to have noticed that sooner." Although it wasn't exactly an apology, Thomas Mitchell's gesture was fairly similar. Paula and I gave the board our detailed 5-year plan the following week. It was a true partnership that brought together my thorough operational plan and her ambition for market expansion. Standing side by side, we boldly responded to inquiries and expanded on one another's arguments. My father was observing us, and I noticed a new look on his face. Not precisely pride, but a sense of awe as though he were witnessing something extraordinary and unexpected happen. Later, Paula raised her glass to losing the business as we celebrated the board's unanimous approval in my office with champagne. I arched an eyebrow. She clarified that we would still be trapped in our old habits if Dad hadn't made his incredibly foolish choice. Are you exhausting yourself? I felt unworthy. He was in charge of everything. Sometimes obtaining what you truly need comes after losing what you believed you wanted. I gave this some thought before clinking my glass against hers in search of something better. I looked out the window at the downtown skyline while we sipped our champagne. The consequence of standing up for my value, both emotionally and professionally, was better than I could have ever dreamed. Despite the difficult journey and profound betrayal, I had not only acquired a share in the family business, I had taken back control of my life, and it was more valuable than any business could ever be. In my case, what would you have done? Would you have left without a word or stood up for what you deserved? Have you ever had to defend your own value in front of family members? Please share your stories in the comments section below. For more real-life experiences, please hit the like button and subscribe if this story spoke to you. Your support is greatly appreciated by this channel. Please remember to share with anyone who may be having difficulty establishing boundaries with family members or recognizing their own worth. The person who reared you may be the most difficult to confront. However, I discovered that it can result in the most fruitful effects. I appreciate you watching, and keep it in mind. Being aware of your value is not selfish, it is necessary.